The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good day to everybody, and thank you for joining our first in a series of educational webinar in 2018. Hope the new year is going well for you guys. We're excited to have Gordon Haley, one of our key partners from Oracle Software, join us today. The topic, as you can see, is around application lifecycle management. We'll be covering security and control change management, to be more specific, as was sent out in the topic. My name is Adel Khan. I'm the CEO of SafePass, and we'll spend a few minutes just kind of introducing what we do as a company for those of you that don't know us, and jump right into the topic at hand today, and we'll go from there. So without any ado, I'll start. Let's see. Okay, here's a quick agenda for the meeting today. After introductions, we will give you a quick background on what lifecycle management is and how companies, typically use that today in a traditional manner. What we're going to also talk about is, some of the new trends on how lifecycle management has changed as organizations have become more and more global. They're rolling out applications, deploying them across different regions. So the challenge of doing manual lifecycle management has grown. We'll also then talk about the security change management process, configuration change management process, talk a few about the common issues customers are facing, specifically around e-business area, and then discuss a case study of a common customer we have together. So just a quick overview on SafePass. We've been in this market for a long time. We were known as Fulcrum Way, recently rebranded. I've written a book on this topic called Governance, Risk, and Compliance Handbook for Oracle Applications. Also serve on the board of Oracle Application Users Group. Been recognized by Gartner as one of the leading platforms in this space, and involved with various other user groups, including Oracle Open World. We'll be announcing some events on our homepage and also our LinkedIn profile. We're adding some user groups, so look out for LinkedIn and website, safepass.com. About 250 customers worldwide, ranging from government entities to startups and high-tech organizations around the world that have recognized the need for internal controls automation, and whether it's access controls management, configuration management, or process management, we have been assisting organizations for a long time. So what we're presenting today is really the real world feedback we get from our customers on a periodic basis through different events and interactions throughout the year. And as we look forward to this year, 2018, we see all application lifecycle management for Oracle E-Business customers specifically become a major topic. So Gordon, thanks for joining again. If you want to just quickly introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about ConfigSnapshot, the product that Oracle Software builds.
Indeed, yeah, thanks, Adil. So my name's Gordon Halley, part of the ConfigSnapshot team. So Rookery Software is the software author, ConfigSnapshot being the actual product. So pretty mature product, something we've been developing for the last 18 years or so, around sort of 600 plus organizations using ConfigSnapshot to support their E-Business Suite instances. We also have a version coming out for the cloud or Fusion applications quite shortly as well, where a lot of similar issues with there. And again, it's an extremely useful application for the Oracle E-Business Suite and shortly for the cloud applications, really at all stages of the E-Business Suite application lifecycle, after which we'll be exploring as part of the session today. Adil, back to you.
Thank you, Gordon. And we'll hopefully leave some time at the end to actually show some live capabilities around some use cases that Gordon and I have worked together to prepare for this webinar. So we're excited to share those with you as well. Okay, so let me just kind of set the framework for those of you that would like to learn more about what this area is and how you can improve lifecycle management. So most of you are on this call, I'm sure, because you already deal with it one way or the other. So I just picked out an old slide on how customers typically go about implementing Oracle. This is the slide around AIM methodology that we see from our customers that have gone through the process. So this is a simple example of how we typically think of application lifecycle management. And there are many different methodologies. So this is just a sample. You start out typically by getting the requirements, whether you're doing an upgrade or re-implementation or deployment. It's always a good idea to start with, really assessing the requirements, doing a fit gap analysis against those requirements. So for example, if your payables process has some unique steps, or your collection process has unique steps, being able to identify those gaps and then addressing those through configurations or extensions or whatever that might be. Improving the design or getting that approved through the business users, configuring the solution so that it can meet the requirements and hopefully overcome any gaps, getting the users and super users to accept the solution, and eventually going live. So that's a typical rollout process that our customers have followed, especially the Oracle customers that have followed either this methodology or some variation of this methodology as part of their the quote-unquote lifecycle management, right? So that's on the left. You'll see the various deliverables that come out of these types of projects, and you'll notice there's data migration, there's documentation, good knowledge transfer, testing, and so forth. So what we're excited to share with you today is how we can help you automate these controls. This is a burdensome process. It fatigues the organization. It's costly, and things can get missed as you have multiple environments and you're rolling the product out or solution out to your customer or your user, ultimate user. So that's essentially the framework of what we'll be talking about. So hopefully now you can see that many of you already do these processes, and that's basically the improvement of this process that we'll talk about. Also, from a controls perspective, being in the controls business, I wouldn't want to pass the opportunity by to just share some methodology type items here with you around software development lifecycle. So if you think about a standard framework like COBIT or ISO 31000 or whatever it is that your company follows or has a variation of that framework that you follow, you'll find that this practice of application lifecycle management is really grounded well in these frameworks that most companies have adapted. So the business case for automation is pretty straightforward. It's not necessarily a new concept we're introducing to the organization. It's really the extension and automation and streamlining of that process that already exists in most well-run organizations. And so just keep that in mind, that when you talk about it internally with your teams in your technology areas, that there is a framework already exists in your organization in most cases, or you can of course adapt one. And so we kind of fit this ALM in part of our IT governance framework on application management. So that's kind of the best practices in an ideal world. But I also wanted to always, throw a joke in there, or just kind of something for humor here, is that, unfortunately, not everything goes perfect in these projects. They're complex. There's lots of resources involved, cost, people, so forth. And they all, on the surface, the project starts with a lot of optimism, and management is excited about the possibilities of results which the project will deliver or technology would deliver. But as we can see from this little Dilbert, that things not always go as planned, as perfect as we all like. So that sums up the need for having a approach and a tool like ConfigSnapshot that enables us to really, keep our projects on time, under budget, and so there's significant value. And beyond the project, being able to then maintain the application lifecycle. So how do we do that today? So as I mentioned in the opening, that we work very closely with ConfigSnapshot. There's also a blog I've put out there for those of you that like to read, and this recording will be linked to the blog, so you can get access to this to share internally with other team members. So typically where we start with some sort of an assessment, we can, if you have config already, you can, use that to do the assessment of your current environment. If not, we provide a free utility called Data Probe that you can download from our website by registering on safepass.com or just simply sending us an email. And what that'll do is capture your current settings. So before you initiate a new update and upgrade and re-implementation and deployment, a good place to start is inventory of your key setups, your master data, security settings, and for example, Oracle E-Business Suite, that would be the responsibility and menu configurations in case of customizations, extensions, reports, so forth. You'll be able to extract those from the what we call the AOL application object layer in E-Business Suite. And so once you have that established baseline, and that sort of lines up with your assessment or discovery phase of your project, then you can scope out, where the opportunities are for improving the overall ALM controls process, right? So whether it's doing the fit gap analysis between a let's say 12.02 version to a 12.24 version. For example, Oracle's introduced some new responsibility menus and so forth in 12.24. So you'll be able to see those. Or payment terms are, for example, different in the new version that you've just installed versus the old one. Or if you're deploying a new country, one of our clients deployed in China, and because of natural language translation, they ended up putting 4,000 new payment terms. And so when we ran these tools, we identified that there was a big gap in what the corporate standards were in the US versus what the business unit had deployed. So those are the types of things in the second swim lane here that you can see will come out in your analysis, and we'll show, I'll ask Gordon to show some examples of those areas. And so ConfigSnapshot is an excellent tool for change management, or specifically around application change management, and that's what we'll share with you shortly. And it also helps you transfer and compare, not only just compare, but also transfer those key setups. Like if you find the differences in payment terms or responsibility configurations, you can move those around. And therefore, it also can be used to help us assist in the user acceptance and testing in general, because a big part of our testing, users test scripts, if those of you that use them on a regular basis as part of your implementation, deployment, or just simple change management, is the ability to really regressively test that function that's impacted by the change and then be able to document that. And so we'll talk about that. And once you're live with this change or release update or whatever the case may be, you can continue to use ConfigSnapshot as a monitoring tool, and with possible addition of Monitor Pass on top of that for alerts and workflow management. So we work in a bundled environment here. As you can see, this whole process of application ALM controls is really integrated between SafePass as the platform with ConfigSnapshot as the deep analytics capability. So let's talk now. That was a quick background on the application lifecycle management, some of the challenges and areas like that, and then let's take a look at the security and configuration areas within Oracle E-Business Suite more specifically. So one of the challenges in any security model is the complexity of the security model, right? So in case of Oracle E-Business Suite, one of the things that, from a controls perspective, auditors and customers are concerned about is who has how much access to the basic forms and functions that can create possible segregation of duties. For example, if a user has access to the supplier page and they can also have access to the payment page, you can create a supplier that may not be approved by the company and then pay that supplier through your bank account, which creates a significant risk in terms of procure to pay process. And so we call those, basically incompatible privileges that lead to segregation of duties. And that's a big trend in the industry right now, as most organizations are concerned about cyber threats. What we find is not just the network protection, that's sufficient. 80% of the risk is within the network of people that are legitimately provided access. It's just that it's difficult to control the policies within complex ERP systems. And so let's take a look at what are those challenges or risks that security management, change management specifically, poses to us and our customers. Just first, the obvious one, probably the most obvious one, is the complexity of the security model, right? So just if you've looked under the covers on R12, and this is something I did a year or two ago, I found 35,000 functions, 12,500 menus. It's probably gone up from that. As you all know, Oracle hardly ever removes anything from the F&D tables, right? They always add to it. So there may be many functions that are dormant from your previous release or just unused because you guys don't have a specific module in manufacturing, let's say, that you don't use, but Oracle is still shipping you all those functions. So the risk is at that complexity level. And then as you implement or upgrade or maintain your applications, a common challenge is the misconfigurations of responsibilities. And people start with good intentions. There's usually a single global template that most of our customers start off with. But as the business grows and matures and learns to use the ERP better over time, and you upgrade and so forth, you end up with having a lot of variations by business unit, whether to just satisfy the local user community in that region or other business reasons, right? So being able to identify those misconfigurations and eyeball them, even with some simple SQL scripts, is very difficult. You almost need a full-time person sitting around looking at, staring at responsibilities, which is like watching the grass grow. So not a very, productive task, doing it manually. The next piece is, you all have good policies to run your business. They're documented somewhere in a 3-ring binder. Your user provisioning process already exists. So, what are some of the risks that you see today? And this is really a checklist for you to take back in your organization and to ask the same questions, right? So there's a provisioning process, have controlled warnings. For example, when I ask for supplier access and I already have payment access, does the approver get that notification that, Adil shouldn't be getting access to suppliers because he can already go in and pay those suppliers? That type of warning is very useful for the approver because, if you're asking for access on a responsibility that may have an average of 500 functions underneath, it's very difficult for a manager, even if they're very familiar with the product and the business, to be able to determine that it's always the case. So if I ask for payables manager responsibility through my form or email or whatever your help desk system is, those systems, including IDM, by the way, right? Even IDM doesn't specify down to the function level. So we actually had a customer in Ohio where the issue got escalated to the audit committee because all of a sudden, large number of people were identified by the auditors as having access to suppliers. And that's why I kind of bring up this example that's fresh in my mind. And the reason was that they had removed access, obviously, many years ago, but they applied a new patch and introduced that function. And most approvers did not realize that that was at the function level, right? So they missed that opportunity, and it was an embarrassment for the executives. So it's a very important part of the function. Also, just the inaccurate settings like profile options and so forth, and differences between UAT and production, right? Those are inaccurate examples of different instances. For example, dev, test, prod having different configurations as a result of whether it's patch management, deployment, or whatever you guys can imagine those reasons. So again, it's cost, effort, and risk that's introduced through security management. Just to kind of stay on top of time here, I'm going to move quickly through this slide. Again, these are available online to gather your information. This is a quick checklist, like I said on the previous slide, that you can apply to your organization to see how your controls are set up and give you a starting point to make a business case for application lifecycle management automation with config and us. So, do the rules meet the requirements? Of course, your business changes, roles change. Do they have segregation of duty tests? And you can read through these profile options, personalizations, configurations, concurrent manager setups. So take a look at this list and go talk to your folks in the organization that are responsible for security and audit and controls, and make sure that you guys have this covered. So just a little tip here. Now let's take a look at configurations. So what we provide and how we work with config is we have this catalog of controls that we've been building over the last, 14 years or so, having gone through, 250 audits of our customers over and over that time. So we have built out a pretty decent asset there. It's about, 400 pages. If any of you are interested in learning more about it, we can set up a call and walk you through it. But examples are, for example, in the record-to-report process, general authorization limits. If that configuration has changed, or somebody, for fraudulent or erroneous reasons changes it to get around a purchase order limit or a journal entry limit in this case, they can go in and do that and then change it back, and all we know is the last change. Whereas what you'll see, the capabilities in config is we can monitor that. So this content is kind of fits very nicely like hand in glove with the config product, and you'll see how this is very useful in a minute. Payment adjustment controls, credit rules. So again, every module has a set of risks that we have identified through our customer audits and customer engagements over the years, and we have compiled a list of over 1,000 or so controls that are relevant. About 200 of those are constantly tested by the external auditors as well. So if you have a audit firm that does testing on your ERP, chances are we can share some information with you that'll help you improve that process as well. So what we do is, to summarize, we take these objects, we make them available to ConfigSnap, and ConfigSnap then actually does the testing that my colleague will show you in a minute. Again, there's a checklist I've included in this webinar for the limited time we have. I'm not going to go in a lot of details, but you can see the obvious ones that might concern you from a financial risk standpoint, like authorization limits are set to default. They've never been set, let's say in production, whereas they were set properly in UAT and it was accepted by the business users. And that can obviously create a havoc on journal entries. Fixed assets, security rules is a big one for R12 customers. Password lifespan for IT security folks. So yeah, I picked a few here, but there's hundreds of these in our catalog. And like I said, we'll be glad to share that information with you if you reach out to us. So let's jump right into the common issues and remediation that we see in the market in the world today, and how we can really prevent that through the application that we'll just show you in a minute. So essentially, what does ineffective ALM controls mean, right? So what we mean by that is, if you have certain functionality working in dev but not working in prod, chances are there's a good chance, in my experience, I would say 80% chance, there's some setup of hundreds of setups that just didn't get documented right in the quote-unquote BR100 document that most of us are accustomed to documenting configurations in, or somehow when you were manually moving that setup, or your consultants were, they just missed it, right? And that leads to a lot of our waste of time and downtime, honestly, and frustration with the user community. So that's a symptom of a costly ALM control failure. I won't have time to go through all of them, but as you can see, customizations, just different version mismatches in functionality. So not only you're having to deal with the new functionality, getting that rolled out to the customers and users, but also dealing with just the nuances in the configuration change management process. Also, there's authorization, right? So if I'm going to allow certain level of employees to have access to setups, for example, in my IT organization for support purposes, who are those employees and how are they authorized? What responsibilities are granted to them? One thing we talk a lot about in access management is firefighter IDs. Do you need access to setups all the time, or do you need a certain time? So being able to essentially run through that effectively, you need ALM controls, and that's what we're proposing as a solution to these challenges. Documenting, I covered that. Documenting your BR100s, just overall overrun projects and downtime, as I mentioned a minute ago. And so the manual effort is definitely costly and is full of errors. And what you're looking to do here is improve those ineffective controls and make them effective over the lifetime of your application. There's also security risks. There's other business risks. So, for example, just who has access to what. Misconfigurations can lead to people having access to ledgers they shouldn't have access to, which means they can post journal entries which are not accurate. So these are just some more examples of not only the cost of control failure, but just the overall pervasive nature of the ERP applications that creates a heightened risk for the enterprise at the enterprise level. And the auditors certainly will highlight that in their audit findings and might even hold up a go-live situation during an audit period, which can impact your financial statements. We actually had that happen to a large rental car customer of ours on the East Coast, where the external auditors held back the signing of financial statements because folks were going in and changing the journal entry, the journal sources from freeze to unfreeze and changing it back to process an interface failure, right? So and it had an impact, a big impact on the market cap to the tune of $1 billion or more. So next, I guess you're thinking, if these are issues, when do we do ALM? What's the best time to do it? We're about to start a new update or a project, or it's a new year, and we're looking for new ways of improving and streamlining, taking the cost out. So this is why this webinar we thought would be timely for the market. So basically, you can do it anytime, really. You can implement it after you go live, but the cost and the benefits are really the greatest when you do during a early stages of solution blueprint, right? When you're just starting to think about a new initiative, an upgrade, a new year, for example, a new audit cycle. Those are some good kind of compelling events that cause you to pick up a solution like this, and that's where you see the most ROI. So what you're seeing in that the green dot, that at the beginning of the project, you'll be able to get the maximum value. Okay. So I have much more information and data on these items, but I really want to focus on our case study here. And it's a common customer of ours that is in the diversified aerospace defense business, and they're a very forward-looking organization. Of course, being in aerospace defense, they truly are the rocket scientists, and they appreciate technology and the benefits that automated controls bring to mitigate risk. And they leverage safe pass controls on ConfigSnapshot programs to be able to overcome some of these challenges that are listed on the left side. For example, as you might imagine, regulatory burdens are very high on certain manufacturing organizations in aerospace defense. So being able to address that labor-intensive process of change management, error prone, I think we have beat that up one pretty good earlier. So we don't want to go more into it, but that's basically their problem as well. Access policy violations were reported by the auditors. Change management process across business units difficult. They have multiple business units across US, UK, Europe, Australia, and other international regions, and they run Oracle R12. So by having our solution in place, they're able to really automate that misconfiguration process or reduce the risk by automation by ALM controls. So 99% plus of their work is performed through automation. They have been able to identify and remediate their access controls very quickly, as you can see with some of the results and findings. Overall cost has gone down because of the first 2 points, right? Because they're using more automation, they don't spend as much time doing manual configuration and review because it's mostly done through the ConfigSnapshot tool, leveraging some of the access controls that we provide them as well. And the auditors are happy, which is a good check mark to have on your business. So with that, I'd like you really to share with you guys how ConfigSnapshot is actually working for this customer and others, and how can it work for you. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Gordon.
Great. Okay. Well, many thanks there. So in terms of ConfigSnapshot, it is a pretty mature application. As you can probably see from that sort of summary slide there, it does provide a whole variety of different areas of functionality. So as Adil rightly points out, it is an extremely useful application, really at all stages of the E-Business Suite application lifecycle. And again, obviously for the cloud applications coming soon as well. The tool itself is client-side software, so it can be downloaded and installed it literally in just a matter of minutes. Out of the box, it's covering 130 plus E-Business Suite modules, as well as all of the more technical side of things. So very broad in terms of the functionality provided, as well as the coverage across the various different parts of the E-Business Suite. Do you want to go next slide? So I'll very quickly just touch on the some of the key areas. And then as I'm doing that, I'll also take you through some sample output. Depending on how we're doing for time, I will try and do a quick product demo, so hopefully you can get a quick sort of look at how it all kind of tends to work. So obviously one of the areas mentioned there is just simply getting a clear current view of exactly how things are set up. So obviously ConfigSnapshot allows you to highly target particular details across the E-Business Suite, generating details like BR100s in just a matter of minutes. Extremely flexible, so you can target down to record level and even within that field, within those. The output is color coded. You can exclude the Oracle seeded stuff if you don't need to see that, but all sorts of other color codes in there to help with the understanding of where things have come from, but then also sort of becoming quite relevant on the compliance side as well. Next slide, please. The next area is the analysis side of things, and here we're looking at areas. Got the next slide, Adil? Great, thank you. So the next area is the analysis side of things. So a couple of the key challenges across the E-Business Suite, if we can go back to the analysis one, is the identification of things like customization. So ConfigSnapshot will effectively scan through, pull out a full inventory of all the customizations, and then at any stage, if you're looking to upgrade, it will tell you how and where they would be affected, how to fix them, etc. Likewise, on the patching side of things, it will give you a nice, clear functional view as to where the patching is having an impact. It'll even give you a dependency analysis, etc. So again, you don't just see the initial point of contact or impact, you'll be able to see kind of the ripple effect and out to maybe a contact point within the E-Business Suite where your end users tend to interact with things. So again, just really taking the guesswork out of where change is getting introduced through things like patching, upgrades, etc. Next slide, please. The next area are the comparisons. So with the comparisons, again, key challenge in the E-Business Suite is understanding where things are perhaps getting a little bit out of sync. So across dev, test, prod, UAT, etc. So again, you can ask it to analyze particular areas, have a look at those. It will identify and highlight for you anything that is inconsistent across them. As you might be able to see from the example at the bottom of the slide, it also understands all of the different entity structures. So if you're working across multiple operating units, sets of books, ledgers, etc., again, you can compare across those and again, check consistency at that sort of level. Across to the left, receiving options, there's a simple example of a comparison being run there. In that example, it is comparing across two different E-Business Suite instances. One of those happens to be release 12.2, and that is being directly compared with an 11.5.10 instance. So again, going back to that whole upgrade and patching scenario, trying to understand what sort of change has been introduced and having that in a business sort of user sort of context, that ability to compare across versions, patch levels, etc., really gives you exactly that. So showing you new fields, obsolete fields, new seeded data, and any changes to existing settings, again, very nicely cleared and clearly displayed for you. Across the E-Business Suite, high risk areas of functionality, so things like we're showing there, top, middle, things like the menu structures, so again, changes through patching and upgrades. Well, obviously, again, like the example Adil quoted earlier, can suddenly result in some unexpected changes to things like user access. So there's an example of that. So in that case, and again, pre and post upgrade, any user that has access to that particular menu, it's all in red text, so it's an Oracle seeded menu. But again, you can very clearly see that they would suddenly, post-upgrade, have access to stuff that would probably be regarded as quite inappropriate. So again, takes the reliance off a testing process to identify where you've got compliance issues coming through. So again, allowing you to be much more proactive. You can also do things like patch level compares, schema level compares. You can even go right down to file system level should you wish to. Next slide, please. The next area, which again I'll hopefully demo for you, on the planning and migration slide, if you can, Adele. That's it, great, thank you. So this is where ConfigSnapshot will again automate the process of moving setups or creating new setups if you're in some sort of project mode here. So again, quite a nice sort of controlled process. You've got that central point where you're gathering together the detail that you need to migrate. So pulling that into the central hub, and then loading that through to one or more EBIS Suite instances. That whole process obviously has to be fully supported. So again, all the different loading mechanisms there are obviously again fully supported by the by Oracle, covering well in excess of probably 1,500 individual steps across the E-Business Suite. So again, it is very, very comprehensive in terms of the coverage it provides, and obviously does so in a very, very sort of secure manner. But again, I'll hopefully try and take you through this for a quick product demo in just a second. And then the final bit is the next slide is the change tracking side of things. So again, another key requirement in the E-Business Suite, really just to try and keep on top of where change is getting introduced. So in this area, there are a couple of different ways that ConfigSnapshot will do that. So you've got these baselines, which kind of take a particular point in time copy of settings, generally holding that as XML data. Those can be scheduled to run at any sort of frequency you might want. But once you've generated a baseline, which can include as much or as little detail as you wish, you can then at any point in the future compare the baseline settings against live or indeed against other baselines, and that will show you who's made what change since that baseline was taken. So really providing a very simple to use but hugely effective change and release management capability. The full audit tracking down the bottom there is a live monitoring capability. So that will capture, rather than just a point-to-point view of change, it will give you a clear view of absolutely all changes, but again, just for the particular parts of the EBIS Suite where you actually may want to use that additional sort of level of granularity. Okay, so you can deploy it on a very, very selective basis. Okay, so that's a very, very quick sort of run through of things like the functionality there. Now, we are getting quite close to the hour, but I will have a go at doing a quick sort of product demo for you. If I can be made the presenter.
Okay, I will make you the presenter, Gordon.
Okay.
And here you go.
That's great, thank you. Right, so in front of me at the moment is the ConfigSnapshot application. So I personally have it installed on my local client machine here, but you can deploy it on a central Windows server, VM, etc. Up and running really in just a matter of minutes. Some advanced areas of functionality across the left, and then things like the basic reporting on the right. So I'm going to very quickly start out by running a simple compare report. So I'm going to stick with this sort of examples Adil mentioned earlier. So I'm going to go into the financials area. I'm going to, in this case, select accounts payable. I'm going to ask it to run a comparison, in this case, just across two EBIS Suite instances. For my first instance, I'm going to use this 12.2.3 instance, so this might be dev or test, for example, and I'm going to compare that with a 12.1.3 instance, okay? So, as I say, I can compare any number of these different EBIS Suite instances, and again, it doesn't matter what version, etc., or patch level they're on. Various different options now to sort of fine-tune exactly what it is I might want to include. So again, I'm going to include a few details here, including some record notes that I've added in here. So I'm going to include some audit notes about the detail I've included. Again, hit continue. Do I want to include, and cover a comparison across all of the different entities, so all the different operating units in this case? Again, I can pick as many as few as I wish. But then the final stage, then obviously I can compare pretty much everything if I wish to. But for the purpose of today, I'm just going to select a couple of the options at the top here. Okay, so just going to run that off. So that is now doing a live comparison of, say, that 12.2 instance against the 12.1.3 instance. Okay, so as you can see, pretty quick. Let's have a quick look at the detail now generated. So date and time stamped at the top there, color codes all explained. And if I get down to the detail here, we've got this live 12.2.3 instance, and here we can see I've got a record in so this is payment terms. So it looks like a new payment term has been added into that 12.1.3 instance. It's got an audit note against it saying this is effectively an approved change. So this is perhaps something I want to migrate through to that 12.2.3 instance. Scroll down again. Again, I've got a slight difference here with the this other payment term. So again, it's got an audit note against that, so that all looks fine. Scroll down again, invoice approval codes, and again, you can simply see here how it's kind of reflecting things like differences. So just a comparison showing here, record in that instance, not in that one, slight change to a description there. So it gives you a very, very clear view, exactly what sort of changes, and inconsistency you might have across different EBIS Suite environments. Okay, so that's a very quick comparison. Again, obviously we can take you through more detailed product demos any stage, but what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go into the migration side of things, going into this planning area. As I say, with the migration side of things, really what you're doing is you're pulling together the detail that you are ultimately going to go and migrate. So I'm going to create let's call it a new plan. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to save this again in the interest of time today. I'm just going to put this straight on my desktop and create new. That's all done. Okay. So here, what I'm now going to do, so I've got a plan. Now I'm going to populate this plan from a very simple template that I've created earlier. So my plan today is only going to have 2 steps in it. So we've got payment terms and responsibilities. So for those 2 steps, what I'm going to get it to do, again, in this planning area, I'm actually going to get it to compare 2 environments again. Okay, but just for those 2 record types there. So first, again, which environment do I want to use as my target? So again, I'm going to stick with that 12.2.3 instance. And there's a source environment, kind of where the information is currently. That's in my 12.1.3 instance. So it's going to compare across those 2 instances just for those 2 particular record or steps there. Just going to run this one let's just look at cash management for today. Okay, let's run that. Okay, and so it's just running through that comparison. So what this process is doing is just isolating the differences between those 2 environments. So if I go into the detail here, I can see those are the same 2 records that have been shown up in that comparison. Okay, so those are the 2 records that are out of sync. So they exist in a 12.1.3 instance, but they don't exist in 12.2. Okay, so that looks perfectly fine. I'm gonna potentially going to look at migrating those. Then if I look at the responsibilities in here, again, it's isolated here that there is a responsibility in a 12.1 instance that doesn't exist in that 12.2 instance. So again, assuming that's all fine. What I could now do is I could just go off and I could actually run some sort of report against the plan. Again, my plan could have a lot of different steps within that. But again, in the interest of time today, I'm just going to go straight through to the migration functionality now. And again, behind the scenes, there is a lot of security behind this. Okay, so again, it's all really sort of locked down in terms of exactly who can do what. But what I'm going to do now, again, top right, I'm going to select the environment I want to load into. Make that connection to it, and then you can see it's asking me to provide a valid EBIS Suite username and password for this instance. So again, I have to be able to and have permission to load into this particular EBIS Suite instance. And I'm going to simply, again, in this case, I'm going to select both of those record types and ask it to make the upload effectively. Okay. So the process is effectively dynamic. So the process looks through, it looks at the record you've got in the plan, it then looks at the various settings that may be already in that target environment, so it works out for you if it's an insert, update, delete, and effectively in this case the payment terms are going to be pushed through forms playback. So it wraps that detail up as an FLD file. The file is automatically FTP'd to the backend server, where you can probably see that's going on behind the scenes. And then to initiate forms playback to run, it effectively navigates through to the appropriate part of the E-Business Suite. and you don't generally see the form open, but obviously to initiate the process, that's kind of what it's doing. Once it's done, so you hear the ping, that means it's done. It shuts it all back down, and it will then move on to the next step. So that's a kind of a forms playback process. So all standard Oracle validation is applied to those records that have just been created in exactly the same way as if you were keying them all in manually. The responsibility, that's created through a public API, and you can see obviously public API is extremely quick. So that's just loaded through, and that would now be in that 12.2.3 instance. So that's a very, very quick sort of whiz through the migration functionality. But obviously we've taken out the potential there for human error. Those same changes could now be applied in exactly the same way. I just migrate them, select other E-Business Suite instances, so dev, test, prod, but I know that they're going to be put in a consistent sort of way. So overrun a little bit there, so apologies for that, but yeah, hopefully, as I say, it gives you a very quick flavour of things. Adil, back to yourself, sir.
That was amazing in 10 minutes or less. I know that was our target. So thank you, Gordon, for showing us. And as you were doing this, I was wondering who else was thinking about, how long this process would take if you did the comparison using, let's say, SQL and Excel spreadsheets, and then actually manually entered these payment terms and responsibilities. And I personally wrote down, 2 days for me to do this, and that's working like 8-hour days, right? So if you do the math, that's a 90% saving by using the tool. Just show you an instance of 2 objects, and of course Oracle has thousands of objects that you have that are impacted when you go through this process. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a definite business case here, and as we can see from the presentation or the actual live demo, that we were able to complete that. Now we're being asked by our marketing folks to get this time down to 45 minutes, and I know I've scheduled this for an hour. I'm glad you guys are sticking around, but apparently the people that listen to recordings like to listen to it fast. Hopefully they can fast forward my parts and get to the good part that Gordon covered. But more importantly, I wanted to just kind of thank everybody for attending today and just recap what we learned today. So the first point was really what are the best practices and some of the concepts around ALM. Hopefully all of you are using those best practices, and that's why you're attending this session. So that's the first good step. I also shared some checklists around configuration and security risk management, and please download the presentation, go through that checklist to generate interest internally and create a business case. That would be the call to action from this educational session. And then lastly, we covered some of the common issues, risk and costs that happen as a result of doing change management on a manual basis in 2018 when everything is automated off our mobile phones. This seems like a no-brainer. So if you are not doing automated change management and if you don't have any tools, please reach out to us. You can try it free option on our website. You can reach out to myself and my colleagues, Gordon, through LinkedIn. That seems to be a great way to get in touch. This is what we do for a living, right? So we won't be bothered. It's not a waste of time for us. This is what we do. We help customers improve their controls around the ALM and other areas. So we're always, as you can tell, excited about talking to you and sharing our knowledge. 18 years this product's been around. I've been doing this for about 15 years. So we'll hopefully be able to share some tips and tricks that are very specific to your pain point, which we obviously couldn't cover in a general webinar today. So you're welcome to reach out to us anytime you want, and please keep tuned for more webinars from us. I look forward to our next sessions. Thank you very much. Bye now. Thank you, Gordon.
Okay, cheers all. Have a good day.